The house is located near Gatwick Airport, a place called Bolney House it was called. Now, one has a location manager to go out and show you all different houses. But as soon as I saw this house, I went down. It was found by the location manager. As soon as I saw it, straight away, that was the house for me. And I was very, very lucky because on the first day of shooting, we did the opening scenes where they arrive at the house in the fog and thick fog and the black cat walking along. And had the wind been blowing that day and blowing the fog away, I wouldn't have got those sort of images. But somehow it was destiny. We got there, it was still, it was foggy, and like the whole thing sort of rolled along.
This house, it knows we're here.
I went up to see the house where they shot The Haunting, and I looked at that, where Robert Wise went to shoot. It was up near Oxford. And The Haunting was also influential at the time to me, because it was very good actors were playing in the scenes, and Robert Wise, he was restrained in his sort of portrayal of horror. And it's not what you see, it's what you think you see a lot of the time. And it's atmospheric. And that to me is what horror is about.
Isn't it just another so-called haunted house?
It's the Mount Everest of haunted houses.
The script is very close to the book. And I really loved the script and I really wanted to do this film. I didn't read the book till some time afterwards. The book, by the way, wasn't called The Legend of Hell House. The book was called Hell House.
Hell House. I expect an answer within a week.
A week?
Take it or leave it.
Matheson had already written that scenario of these sort of 5 days in the big house. I thought it was really added a lot to it. The countdown each day, and you knew that there was only going to be 5 days and something was going to happen during those 5 days. I think it was a big plus factor. It wasn't used that much in that day, in that period of time. You didn't see that device used very much, but it then became used quite often in films.
You can't solve it. It cannot be solved.
During that sort of period of time, I wasn't subject to sort of too many influences by too many either individuals or situations. I really was going my own way with everything and doing things. We used certain tricks with lenses that hadn't been done before, and we were sort of going down a pathway. There was quite a bit of handheld stuff in the film too that wasn't generally used as much inside the studio floor that we were doing. So we were sort of doing some tricky things at the time. I'm a big fan of shooting in the studio, not on location, because of the camera movements you want to do and the extensive camera moves that I like to do. And I like to have a sort of really busy camera, and you're restricted on location because the rooms, the actual rooms of that actual house were nowhere near as big as what we made in the film, because I like to move the camera around such a lot. Alan Hume was very, very fast, but he was very, very fast with quality, had a big sense of humour. But also, he was trailblazing in his own way. He'd pick up the camera, the handheld camera, and run around the set with it and do things that we hadn't seen before. And we did a lot of work, he and I together. When I'm directing a film, I dream the scene the night before. I see it in colour, I see the movement of the camera, I see the image in my mind, and then I set out to recreate that the next day when I go on to the set. And how you do it, the speed of the track is in its form a way of acting, really. And when the artists are involved in a particular scene, the speed that you track in makes a statement of its own. And you can vary that, and you can move the camera around, and that is a sort of instinct that you have, because you sort of can see how that scene fits in. So if someone's saying something very emotional and you track him very fast, you're going to ruin that emotion. So it's how slow do you go? And that's a sort of, that was just done through instinct. There are occasions where the camera's sort of tracking through the rooms of Hell House, and it can be the presence that's following them. And I left it sort of ambiguous on, you could think that, or you could just get wrapped up in the story that's sort of unfolding in front. But I did feel that that was indicative of a presence that was just observing everything all the time. That was deliberate, because that was what I was saying about creating the slow suspense and the build-up of tension. It's not what you see, it's what you don't see that is more scary. I never really interfered, because I didn't want to, with the look of the film in terms of colour. I always have believed that you let people create first, and then after, if you want to change it, you may change it, but you don't tell them how you want it in the first place, because you lose their creativity. So you ask them what their thoughts were, and they tell you, and then you can say no if you visualize it a different way. But often they come up with things that are way beyond what you thought yourself. What happens in this situation is the wardrobe designer has really the first say on what the artist is going to wear. And then you have a meeting with the artistic director or the set designer, and they can complement what the artist is going to wear, or they can go against it with their colour schemes. And in this case, in a lot of occasions, the colour schemes are the same. There's scenes where he's in a blue jumper and against a blue background, but it's a different kind of blue. But the way Alan Hume lit it was so sort of spectacular that there was no clash. So normally the wardrobe person would have the first say, the art director would have the second say, the cinematographer would have the third say, and I would have the fourth say. Same with actors. You know, and if I'm directing actors, I always let them, I never tell them how to play the scene straight away. I always wait to see what they have got in their own minds, and then I either add to it or whatever. The casting was very quick. It was Sue Nichol was the casting director, and I had no, what's the word? I had only delight at what she chose. Roddy McDowall was a really top choice for me, and Clive Revill, Gayle Hunnicutt, Pamela Franklin. It was the perfect cast for me. There was never, what's the word, a discussion about anybody else playing those parts. I saw them, and they were right, and that was it. The cast got along superbly. They interacted well. It was, despite us running around with a handheld camera, or Alan Hume running around with, it was quite a well-disciplined film, and the artists were excellent in the way that they interacted with each other, and yeah, it just worked. Roddy McDowall was a lovely, lovely guy. Later, when I was to make Dirty Mary Crazy Larry, he played a part and didn't take a credit for it, because I didn't have a big part available for him. So I asked him to play the leader of the supermarket, the boss of the supermarket, and he was to go on to play that without a credit. That's the sort of guy he was. He was so integrated into film. He published a book of his photographs, superb photography. So yeah, he was outstanding, a real sort of bastion of Hollywood. And his dinners at his house in Los Angeles just had every star you can imagine at the table. Yeah, he was great. I do have a favourite scene in the picture, and it's where the three psychics get together, right, just a little way into the picture, and the psychics are hired and they're met up in different ways. So a car comes to pick up Pamela Franklin. Roddy McDowall arrives by train. And it's such a tricky shot, and I wonder if anybody could figure out how I did it. But the train comes along, Roddy McDowall comes into frame, and as the train passes, I switch focus to the Rolls Royce that's bringing the other medium. And you think, well, how can I time that? How can a train that's coming, you know, at high speed past you, and as it goes past you, in the exact spot is this moving car with this other medium inside. You know, it's one of the shots I'm most proud of in the film, because it's the sort of thing you can't figure out, how did he do that?
Very clever.
The special effects was before the day of digital imagery, as it were. So everything had to be done without any aid or any sort of trickery with the computer. So it's all natural. And there's a scene where Pamela Franklin comes into her bedroom, and she sees that someone's lying in her bed, and there's the moving shape of the figure. But all in one shot, there's no cuts at all. And in the same shot, she goes over to the bedclothes as the body's moving. She goes back like that, and there's no body there. And you think, well, how was that done? Like, there's somebody under that cushion for sure, somebody under the sheet, but when she went like that, all in the same shot, no trick cut, no nothing. How was that done? And I'm really proud of that, because the body's disappeared, but you've never seen it disappear. I'm not revealing our secrets, but all the trick stuff in the film, or all the sort of, it was all done with thought applied to it. Like, we had no computer aid of any kind within the film. And I'm proud of that too. Like, we sort of invented different ways to do all the special effects.
Ectoplasm forming.
In the Legend of Hell House, they talk about electrical something energy towards the end of the film. And what I believe is that when people die, they leave behind electrical energy, not electronic, electric energy, and that disperses into space. But sometimes it gets trapped, and this gives you a feeling that there are ghosts around. But as in the film, we state that the energy is mindless and directionless, which is what I believe. I believe that when you die, you leave an energy behind, but you couldn't injure anybody with that energy. You couldn't cause an effect. It's just mindless electrical energy that disperses into outer space. That's what I think.
Now, the energy I talk about is a field of electromagnetic radiation.
EMR.
Exactly.
We had a guy called Tom Corbett, who was from the Psychic Council or whatever, and he was our advisor on the film. But I must say, I called in several mediums on the film to see if they could do anything for me. There's a scene in the film where it's Pamela Franklin, and she's going into a trance, and the stuff comes out of her fingers. The sort of electrical impulse comes along, and I tried to do that for real at one point. I know it's a special effect, but I called down a medium and tried to see if they could actually do it on camera. And none of the mediums, unfortunately, could actually reproduce what the film did when I brought them in and asked them if they would sort of take a sit-in and do it. So I was unable to say, well, you know, the paranormal's real and I filmed it, because that didn't happen. But yes, I do believe in the paranormal, but not the paranormal in its general terms. I looked back on the film, and I'm just really pleased with what we achieved at that particular time. I don't think I would do anything different. You see, there are a few surprises, and there are a few first-time things that happened at that time. One was the music score. Now, the music score was electronic, done by Miss Derbyshire, her name was, and there was two of them. And they used an electric keyboard. But it was the first time that it had been used in film at that particular time. And what they did is that they used sounds from like a bell or footsteps or something like that, and they used the sound of real things and made it into a musical sound. And the score is out of this world. The film wasn't talked about much at the time, and it was only later that people gave it its sort of kudos. I understand that it's got into the top 10 of all horror films of all time from the British Film Institute, and but that's now, you know. But when I made it, and it was distributed by 20th Century Fox, there was no magic. The reviews were good, but they weren't. They became outstanding later on. I went off to Hollywood when it came out, and so I was over there preparing other films, and so I wasn't really part of the release in England. At this particular period in time, I was doing a lot of filming, and when you're doing a lot of film, you can't pay attention to what's going on to a previous film you've made. And I was going through this period where I was making a lot of films out in Hollywood, and you get so busy, you're trying to sort of catch up with what's happened when your film's released. But I really wasn't able to track it down and find out what was happening. But I just remember the reviews at the beginning being okay, but not sort of outstanding. It was only later. I needed it when I made it. That's when I wanted it to sort of get the sort of reviews that it's getting now. I could have done with that at the time. But quite a few films that I've made have been reassessed and reviewed a lot more friendly than they were at the time, or a lot more impressive than they were at the time. And Legend of Hill House was one of these. The film had a very big impact on my career, because I didn't know, but Disney had arranged for their own private screening of the film, because they were looking to change pace with the films that they were making at that time. And I got a call from the president of Disney, and he said that I've just seen The Legend of Hill House, and I want you to come out and do the Escape to Witch Mountain for us. We want to go down a different route to how we've been making our films. Major change for me. So I did Escape to Witch Mountain, I did Return to Witch Mountain, and then I did Watcher in the Woods. So it was a major step for me. I'd always wanted to work for Disney too. I wanted to work for Hammer because they were an institution. I wanted to work for Disney because they're such an influence on everybody's lives. And so I was able to sort of achieve both of those. It was Watcher in the Wood that was the most scary, but it wasn't what you saw again. It was what you didn't see. It was the atmosphere and the escalating sort of tension that was going. That's what the sort of that's my type of horror, and that's what I like to do. And with Watcher in the Wood, I was able to do it. I found it easy to do, yes, because I sort of was able to remember my own childhood and what would scare me at the time. But there are certain restraints that you put in. The Incubus I did because I was such a fan of John Cassavetes, and I did Brass Target with John Cassavetes as well. And so when I knew that he'd signed up to do Incubus, I then wanted to do it because he was the only star performer in the Incubus. Most of the young people in it were trying to sort of make their name. But working with John Cassavetes is very special. And he's a very intelligent actor and a very intelligent director himself. And it's very interesting to work with a lot of artists, also directors. I've worked with a lot of mainline artists that were directors, like Orson Welles and people like that. And John Cassavetes, I always wanted to know how did he direct? What was his sort of plan and his method of working? So I was really happy to go and do that film. Howling 4 was, I'd seen Howling 1, or The Howling, I think the first one was called. And it was werewolves and stuff. And yeah, I wanted to sort of get involved in that. But of course it didn't work out the way I'd wanted it to work out. And scenes were inserted into the film that I didn't want inserted into the film. So I don't look on to Howling 4 as being representative of what I can do.
Oh, that's it.
My 3 favourite films of what I've made, Legend of Hell is the number one. It's my favourite film of my own work. The second one is Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry, and I really enjoyed making that film. They were both very successful. And then Escape to Witch Mountain was, so that's my 1, 2, 3 out of all the films that I've made.
I'm here! Kill me!
A film was made that was a remake of the Robert Wise film. Not my film, but it's sort of, the interiors of that film were exactly the same interiors in my film, which were very special. There were some very special wooden designs of in Legend of Hell House, and they were put in this other film. But they have actually remade Legend of Hell House. I'd like to do Hell House 2. Why not make a sequel? With not this, well, the only survivor was Roddy McDowall and Gayle Hunnicutt. They're the only 2 that walked out at the end. And then you have the shot of the cat at the end that leads you to believe they haven't got rid of the ghost, as it were, anyway. I've been thinking about it for a long time. I have an idea circulating in my mind, and when I do it, I want to do something that nobody's ever done before. I'm trying to think of what haven't we seen. What sort of, if I was to do not a remake of Legend of Hell House, but if I was to do another film, I'd want the ghost or the image or whatever the ending is to be something that we've never seen before. And I've been struggling with this over a few years, and I think I'm sort of slowly getting the idea of what to do. You know, horror films, if it's gratuitous horror, no. But if it's a thriller horror, like Don't Look Now, I mean, I could see that time and time and time again. And if there's something, Rosemary's Baby was another beautifully made horror films. In all these cases, what I liked, I got to talk to Roman Polanski about his horror films and what he did and this, that and the other. And The Exorcist was a very interesting film. And Max von Sydow was a real plus in that film. I was later to work with him when I made Brass Target, and I cast him in Brass Target as the assassin because of The Exorcist and because of Bergman's films, which he always played in the Ingmar Bergman films, that I was such a big fan of. And I thought The Exorcist was just a gripping piece of work anyway. And you can do that too. If you can, it had everything because it had the visual, but it also had the atmosphere. And the visual wasn't gratuitous. It didn't throw it all at you. And there was a reason for everything. But it was done it's done so classy by William Friedkin. He's sort of, you know, you can combine the two. I'm talking about where there's sort of visual blood and gore when there's no reason to have it. But The Exorcist had every reason to have it. There's a sort of real space for horror films on the itinerary, but the next one I do, I want it to be so thought-provoking, and what I've got to say has to be really, really mind-blowing, and that's what I'm trying to sort of figure out at the moment.